Good morning, everyone. You're very welcome to this webinar where we are discussing how you can elevate your pensions expertise with the Retirement Planning Advisor course. My name is Brian Dunphy and I'm a Student Relationship Manager with LIA for this course and also a graduate of the Postgraduate Diploma in Financial Planning and a CFP myself. So I've taken on this module in the past, so I'm a former student. I'm delighted to be joined today by James Skehan, independent professional trustee with over 45 years of pensions industry expertise and experience, and he's also the lecturer for this course. James, you're very welcome.
Thanks, Brian. Good morning, everybody.
We're also joined by Elizabeth Byrne, private client advisor with Unio, who is a recent graduate of the course and has attained the Retirement Planning Advisor designation, but has also recently completed her final modules of the Postgraduate Diploma in Financial Planning and successfully attained the CFP designation. So good morning and congratulations, Elizabeth.
Good morning, thank you.
And finally, David Roche is joining us. He's Senior Financial Advisor with Irish Life and a graduate of LIA, having recently also attained the RPA designation, along with the SIA and FPRA designations. So also congratulations, David, and welcome.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks, Brian.
So thank you all for joining us today and participating in the webinar. Before we get started, I encourage our audience to ask questions. So you'll see a Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We've set some time aside at the end to answer these questions, and any questions we don't get to, we'll follow up with individuals afterwards. So to attain the Retirement Planning Advisor designation, you must complete one module called Retirement Planning. This module is one of the modules of the Postgraduate Diploma in Financial Planning, so it can be completed as part of this program, or it also can be undertaken on a standalone basis. So to start off, James, would you mind please sharing with us and giving us an overview of what will be covered throughout the 12-week course, and what key skills and knowledge can a student expect to gain from participating in this course?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I suppose, first of all, it's important to point out that it is a comprehensive course. The textbook runs to approximately 450 pages. And I suppose the theme throughout the textbook and the lecture course is change. As you said in the intro, over 45 years working in pensions. But to be honest with you, in the last 4 years, there's been more changes in those 4 years than in the previous 45. And the whole purpose of the course is to cover both the basics, but also to emphasize this particular emphasis on what's happened in recent years. And basically the ever-changing pension environment that we're dealing with. One point to bear in mind, though, is that the 1st of July, from a knowledge point of view, is the cutoff date. No doubt there will be changes in pension legislation, et cetera, in the coming months. But from an exam point of view, it's only up to the 1st of July. That's the cutoff date for the textbook. So in terms of what the course will cover, first of all, we will start off with the state pension, because that's basically the first pillar of retirement planning. And that in itself is undergoing quite a lot of changes recently. You know, the state pension age has now been fixed at 66, but there's now a huge degree of flexibility as to do you take benefits at 66 or do you wait until 70 or whatever. We will then look at the whole issue of retirement ages in both the private and the public sector and how that interacts with the state pension. We'll then go on and look at individuals and the different types of individuals. So starting off with the self-employed or those that are in a partnership. We'll then go on to the public sector and private sector employees. And in the private sector, we look at the business owners, the proprietary directors. And obviously a huge change there has been the change in the regulations affecting PRSAs and the flexible funding that can take place through a PRSA. In terms of what I would call ordinary employees, we will look at those that are both in defined contribution schemes, but also in defined benefit. Now, defined benefit schemes are shrinking, but there's still more individuals included in defined benefit schemes than defined contribution. And whilst students may not be managing or looking after a defined benefit scheme in their own right, they will come across individual clients that they will be advising on who are either active or deferred members of defined benefit schemes. So that's a key part of, if you like, the knowledge acquisition as we go along. The course will then look at benefits on leaving service and also benefits at retirement. And there has been obviously a gradual shift towards or drift towards the ARF in recent years. That's starting to change back though, because annuity rates have been increasing in the last couple of years. So a key element is, and again, very important when you're advising clients, the pros and cons of both the annuity option and also the ARF option. In terms of leaving service, do you leave benefits where they are, or do you transfer them to your new scheme, to a personal retirement bond or PRSA? And again, we will look at the pros and cons of each. I think that highlights the practical knowledge that individuals will be able to take away from the course. Because we look at the, if you like, practical day-to-day scenarios that students will come across and when dealing with their clients. We'll then look at charges. And again, that's a very important part. Pensions Authority have a big bee in their bonnet about charges and value for money. So we'll explore the different types of charges and how they can be communicated to clients when advising them. We then look at benefit and contribution limits. And again, that particularly applies to occupational pension schemes. And again, a contrast between what you can do with a PRSA or what you can do with an occupational pension scheme. We look at a significant analysis of both those options. From a legal perspective, pension adjustment orders are becoming more and more common, unfortunately, as relationships continue to break down more and more. And that's an important aspect to understand the basics of pension adjustment orders and how to advise clients on them. We then kind of move away from the individual client and then into the group scenario. And we look at both group risk on the one hand, but also then group pensions. And again, this, we have auto enrollment coming down the tracks. We expect, hope, for it to happen probably early next year. And, providing employees with pension benefits is becoming a very complicated scenario for employers as a result of IORP2 and the growth in master trusts being used for providing benefits for employees. We also look at how auto enrollment will impact existing pension schemes and what advice needs to be given to employers in relation to their existing scheme if the intention is to continue with that rather than go into the auto enrollment sector. We then look at investment. Investment is a very, very interesting part, and we look at the different asset classes. We look at the likes of default investment strategies that's used in group schemes. And a big portion of the investment section is sustainable investment. So ESG, environmental, social, and governance, is becoming center stage in relation to investment. And that's been driven kind of like twofold. On the one hand, you have increasing EU regulations sort of pushing it, but equally you have clients are expecting and looking for the investments that they are going to be engaged in to have an ESG slant. And then we will wrap up by looking at the whole fact-finding process, the central bank, the consumer protection code, et cetera. And then the last part is we have a number of case studies where we take practical situations, two examples of individual clients and then one of an employer. And we'll go through what their current situation is and how we go about analysing their needs and putting forward recommendations. So that's kind of, if you like, a whirlwind tour. But as I say, it's 450 pages of textbook. So it's really everything you wanted to know about pensions, but we're afraid to ask.
It's brilliant, James. You give me flashbacks to my student days of when I studied the course, and it certainly is comprehensive. Like when you go through it like that, actually, and you remember, there is an awful lot you take away from the course. So with that in mind, Elizabeth, do you mind if I ask you, following on what James has covered there, can you share your experience while studying the module and the learnings that you took away from it?
Yeah, so I actually ended up doing the RPA twice. I did it initially when it was the level 7 RPA 1 and RPA 2. I'm not sure if anyone remembers that. And then I also did it with James as the level 9. And I find that the new module that James is covering now, it's much more practical. Literally, as you're going through the 12-week course, you're starting to bring your knowledge into your practical day-to-day with your clients, which I was amazed at the start. Even within a couple of weeks, you were really been able to use that knowledge. So it's only a 12-week course. It absolutely flies in, one module a night. But it's great to be able to have that, to be able to differentiate yourself with the RPA designation against other people who just have the QFA, but also the knowledge that you have to support your clients is brilliant. It's fundamental.
Brilliant. Listen, thanks for that. And David, if you don't mind, I'll ask you the same question. What learnings did you take away from this course?
Yeah, really similar to Elizabeth. I did RPA 1 and RPA 2 as level 7 as well. And that, that gave you a bit of a basis, but the level 9 really kind of kicks it on. It's a much more in-depth course, and like very similar to Elizabeth as well. I was bringing nuggets each week to my clients. Only yesterday was I speaking to somebody who's gone through a divorce, and that was really helpful. The whole chapter on PAO, I was able to open up the book and had it there beside me as well when I was chatting to her. So it's a really, really, really essential tool, I would say, to retirement planning is the RPA.
Brilliant. Listen, it's great to hear from both of you who have studied the previous level 7 course as well, and to share with those that might be in the same boat as to why the level 9 is an option for them and why they should consider it. So it's fantastic to hear that. If you don't mind, I'd move on to talking about actual balancing the studying now with your work-life balance. And I talk to students on a daily basis, and the one thing they're always worried about is the time commitment and how they'll manage when trying to balance professional and personal commitments. So Elizabeth, how did you manage attending online lectures, reading material, and balancing this with your professional and personal commitments?
Yeah, well, for me, it took me a while to actually hit the go button, if you like, and say, right, I'm definitely doing this. When I did it, I had 2 young children, full-time job, and I had a husband who was out of the country more than he was in the country, traveling with work. So it took me a good consideration to go. And I suppose throughout my education career, I suppose I've been very you know, considered about doing it. So when I did the RPA, you know, the one thing I'd say is you're not going to regret doing it, but you might regret not doing it. You know, just it's 12 weeks. And the balance was really, really important to me. What I'd say is, though, it's one module a night, but you do need to do some work during the week. You know, there are continuous assessments throughout, which is great, because on week 4 you have a continuous assessment, which means you only have 3 weeks work and you have an assessment, so you're only been examined on those 3 weeks. But if you don't start work until week 3, you know, you're going to have a hectic week, so you need to be working. So you do need to, you know, be organized, make sure your family are committed to supporting you in it, but you won't regret it, and you'll really differentiate yourself against the QFAs as well.
Brilliant.
Brian,
David,
yes,
sure.
I think that's a hugely important point. You need to get stuck in from the very start. Looking back on previous terms, the results in the first assessment are always poorer than the second assessment and the final exam, and really it just points to students kind of just slowly getting into the course, whereas you really need to get into the course from the very start. And bearing in mind, each of the 2 interim assessments carry 25% of the marks each. So if you do well in continuous assessment 1, you're off to a flying start.
It's brilliant, David, James, because I was leading on to ask David, in fairness, about his experience of how he approached the exams, because what people on the webinar might not know is that over the 12 weeks, the exams are broken down into 3 separate exams, and you're not relying on one exam at the end, which from my personal experience definitely benefited me because of the approach to the assessments. But David, can I ask, how did you manage the exam process?
I think the first thing I did, and we've been doing it for a little while, is I have a little study group. So there's myself and 2 other lads that I work with, and we actually met through the LIA. We just came through the chat in a lecture. So don't be afraid to fire something into the lecture. Does anybody want to meet up afterwards for a study group? Because that has been so beneficial to me. What it allows us to do is, say, for example, for the first exam, one person took a chapter each and became an expert on it, and we each taught each other the chapters then and pop quizzed, and it was really, really beneficial. We went really hard on the midterm exams because they're broken down. It's much less content to study rather than the final exam, which covers more or less everything. So if you can get good results in the first 2 exams, you can, I won't say put your feet up, but you can certainly relax a little bit. And it takes the weight off your shoulders. You can nearly have the exam passed or the module passed if you really put your head down for the first 8 weeks.
Brilliant. I can echo what you're saying, because I did the same. I really went after the in-class exams from the start. But what it also allowed me to do is, as you touched on, is you do become a little bit more relaxed if you know you have certain marks in the bag. And by default, you're actually taking on board a lot more when you're in a relaxed environment, and you'd be surprised at about how advanced your technical knowledge is going. And James, to echo what you said in relation to the continuous assessment 1, I learned a new skill as a man through this course, to being organized. And it is imperative that from the start, you actually use the resources that are there. So I would certainly set aside time before the lecture to read material in advance, so that you're actually attending the lecture to listen rather than, and this is the big challenge for man, listening and reading at the one time, they don't work. So it really is a benefit to have prepared week on week, and you build on your knowledge week on week that way. So it is important, because if you get the ground running from the start, it becomes a very enjoyable 12-week process. And that's the whole objective. You want to adapt all the learnings into your own professional life. So look, guys, thanks a million for those insights, because I know some students contemplating this course will be nervous about the time commitment and balancing studying while working. So it's great to hear your personal perspective. And Elizabeth, it was, especially as a student who recently completed the course, it's great to hear that this is actually somebody who's just completed the last semester. So can I follow up with another question to you, David? What has this designation added to you, firstly from a credibility point of view, and secondly, can you share how you use the knowledge and skills gained from the course have been directly applied to your working financial planning life?
Yeah, well, both professionally and in front of customers, the RPA is definitely another kind of, suppose, string in your bow. It definitely, with your colleagues and so on, it helps you to be kind of just one little bit step ahead, I suppose. It definitely helped me with my, like, Irish Life really focused on retirement planning, and it definitely helped me be up there in terms of the knowledge that I had, compared to some of my colleagues. I suppose the most important thing for me is being able to translate the real complexities of retirement planning with my customers, and just basically taking that 450-page textbook and bringing it down into a page or two that is relevant to the client. That's what I always say to my customers. We all have our areas of expertise. This is mine, and I try to be the best of what I can be to make it easy for them. And just like they are in their jobs, like if I bring my car to the mechanic, I want them to fix it and just give me the bill. I don't want to know what's going on under the hood. And I find that's the same if you're picking up somebody's complex retirement case. You just want to go to them with the answers as opposed to all the complexities of it. So the RPA is our essential tool, if you like, to do that as retirement planners.
Brilliant. Thanks, David. Elizabeth, can I ask you the same question?
Yeah, I suppose when I started the RPA, I just really wanted to have a differentiation for myself, but I had got the CFP in my mind and kind of considering, would I be able for it? So when I did the RPA, it was great to be able to say, right, I can do this. And I've been studying for the last 5 years. I'm just finished now. I'm never studying again. But you kind of get a bug as well. And I think the RPA gives you that bug, because it's only 12 weeks and you're like, I can do this. And then you could do the SIA, and then you could do the CFP or the postgrad. And I've just finished the master's in financial planning and sustainability as well. So you'll get into a rhythm of doing it. And because it's all in bite-sized pieces of 12 weeks, it is so doable, and to be confident and knowledgeable in yourself that you can do it, and trust yourself that you can do it.
Brilliant to hear. You're a real advocate for somebody who started to study one module and took on the bigger journey. It's like when I decided to run a marathon, I decided to run 1 mile, and suddenly it evolved, and that's a long time ago. But it is practical. It just shows things are manageable when you break things down. And in particular, the 12-week course, when you break it down into 4-week tranches, it's very manageable and it goes by very quickly. And it is about getting in a good operating rhythm, because once you've got that operating rhythm, you will be the Elizabeth Byrne of this world. You'll go on and do another module, and you'll go on eventually to be a CFP and perhaps consider doing the master. So it is, once you get into that rhythm, it's a matter of keeping it going. So it's great to hear from you. James, I know you alluded to this early on, and it happens every month. It seems to be there's a change in the pensions landscape, but you were talking about the evolving landscape in pensions, and have to say, you have to stay ahead of the curve and be on top of your game when advising clients. And your practical approach to this module means that it's covering very topical and relevant material.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it is. And funny, for every new term, I have to revise the textbook to take into account the changes that have taken place since say 6 months ago. And as I say, like auto enrollment, we've a much firmer handle on how that's going to look. So that had to be updated. The last couple of finance acts have brought in very far-reaching changes to the pensions landscape, and we've had to, build those into the textbook. I would stress that the textbook is the foundation. The purpose of the lectures is to take kind of particular parts of the textbook and go into them in a bit more detail. But the textbook is the foundation, no question about that. And in fact, the new section in the textbook for this term is that there's a chapter which sets out one of the different organizations that are involved in pensions, like the Pensions Authority, the Revenue Commissioners, the Pensions Council, but also a snapshot of the different pieces of legislation going back to the Pensions Act, and how they have changed the overall pension landscape. So that's really the purpose of it. It's to bring the changes into the lectures and into the textbook. And the one thing, an important change this year, in fact, is that I was conscious in previous years that, okay, the final exam is 3 out of 4 questions, you have to answer 3. But in class assessment 1 and 2, in the past, there was 2 questions, you had to answer both of them. This year, we're introducing a choice concept. So there'll be 3 questions and you have to answer 2 from those 3 questions, which I think is a little bit easier and fairer for students.
Brilliant to hear that we're getting feedback and we're changing the course to adapt to our students' needs. Yeah. That's fantastic, James. And the ever-evolving landscape, it is fair to say, I'm sure David and Elizabeth will agree, James brings it to life. He certainly does give us that practitioner experience, and the fact that you've been here before and you've seen the evolution of pensions for a while, as have I, and I've seen it. It changes rapidly. But it's great to have that technical knowledge. It's incredible when you're sitting in front of clients that you can bring this to the party now. So look, guys, final thoughts. Thanks for all the insights you've given us, but I have a final question for you each. Would you have any additional words of encouragement for anyone who's on today's webinar, who's thinking about making the decision to undertake the retirement planning module? And David, I might ask you first.
I'd just say get involved. It really is a transformational module for your career, and if not for your career, for your clients. It really, I suppose, transforms how you get to speak to your clients, simplifies everything for them, and builds your knowledge and confidence in front of the customers. And you get 12 weeks in front of James, who is the pension guru in Ireland. So I encourage people to ask questions. Get involved, get into the chats, and you'll learn from your fellow students as well as from James.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. Elizabeth, do you have anything to add?
Not really. I think David said it all there, but just start, you won't regret starting, but as I said earlier, you might regret not starting. And look, if September doesn't suit, you can do it in January, but maybe you do the RPA in September and you'll be doing the SIA in January. You just don't know how this could really start snowballing your training journey. But it's such a worthwhile course, and you and your clients will benefit from this.
Thank you so much.
Good luck if you start.
Great. And James, for those on the webinar who are potentially going to be your students in September, do you have any words of encouragement for those that might be on the fence and worried about starting in September?
Yeah, it's funny, when I go back to the very first lecture I did, I started off, I gave a bit of a CV about myself, but I said the one thing to bear in mind is nobody has all the answers. And what I said was that, look, I may not know the answer to a particular thing, but I will go away and research it, which is just as well, because 5 minutes into the first lecture, somebody asked me a question that I didn't know the full answer to. But it highlights, a huge part of the lectures. And this, I think, is a huge encouragement to students. The purpose of the lectures is, as I say, to touch on various topics from the textbook, but it enables students to ask questions and to challenge. And as well as asking me, what you get from previous terms is that someone will ask a question, but you might get 6 different views from different students. So that's kind of that cross interaction between students is a huge part and a huge help and support to students. So definitely, okay, the textbook is quite long, it's 450 pages, but it's designed to deliver a level 9 qualification. And from my perspective, I got my first pension exam within 2 years of joining the industry. And I remember at the time, my salary increased by £96 per annum as a result. So there's a bit of an encouragement there. I did my most recent one, which was a trustee qualification about 4 years ago. It's you need to learn all the time in the pensions industry, and the RPA lectures will give you that inside knowledge and also practical help in dealing with clients on a day-to-day basis. So enroll and participate.
It's great to hear. Thank you, James, Elizabeth, and David. I'm sure you've given a lot of people on this webinar plenty to think about as they prepare to take the next step towards attaining the Retirement Planning Advisor designation. For those of you who would like to know some more about the program, you can find out further information on our website, which is www.lia.ie, or you can email our team directly at level9@lia.ie. Or finally, you can always reach out to myself, Brian Dunphy, and I'd be more than happy to chat to you in more detail and help you, advise you on what would be the next step for you. So you can reach out to me by email, and my email is brian.dunphy@lia.ie. So we just have a few questions in the Q&A before we finish up. The first one is, when do I have to enroll by? So the enrollment closes on the 23rd of August. However, James, you'll probably agree with me, your class can be quite populated. Last year we had quite a significant number of students. So what I would encourage people to do is, if you are thinking about enrolling, start the enrollment process immediately. The application form can be found on our website, and it's an online application process. And then our enrollment team will be in touch with you in relation to your application once they've received it. We have another question. With all the changes happening in pensions now, would you recommend doing this course in September, or would it be better doing the course when most changes come into effect? James, I'd like your thoughts, because I think there's changes happening. You know, we don't know when they're going to happen, but there's, you know, never a bad time to do this.
No, I in a way, sort of how long is a piece of string? There's never, never, I suppose a very good example of that was the changes to PRSAs. It just came out of the blue and caught everybody on the hop. You know, certainly, you know, pension simplification report was issued a number of years ago, and a significant chunk of that report has now been implemented. So I think certainly, you know, change will continue to happen, but I think the bulk of the changes have happened to date. So I would have thought now is probably as good a time as any to enroll.
Brilliant. We have one other question. When would a student expect to receive their textbook? Well, you certainly receive your textbook a couple of weeks in advance of the first lecture. So once you enroll, your enrollment will be confirmed, and then before the start of the lectures, you'll receive your textbook in the post, and that will give you an opportunity to start studying or start reading the material in advance. As James said, it's quite a bulky book, so it's one to get your teeth around from the start. So it would arrive to you in the post when you've enrolled. I think that's all the questions. So unfortunately, that's all we have time for. One thing I do want to share with everybody on the webinar is those attending will receive an email from LIA today outlining some funding options that are available to you if you wish to apply for them. So keep an eye out in your inbox for an interesting email in relation to potential funding towards the cost of this course. And we'll share them with you today. So it just leaves me to thank you again to our speakers for being on the webinar today and for sharing your insights. And thank you to everybody who attended. We really appreciate you taking the time to attend the webinar, and we hope you found it beneficial. Thanks a million.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.